Good morning. My name is Linda Zetterberg, and I serve as the treasurer on your DuPage UU Church Board of Trustees. We want to welcome everyone to this morning to our open and inclusive virtual community. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many spiritual paths to truth and meaning, and pledge to support one another as we explore these paths. We are so glad you are able to find us and join us this morning for our live stream service. Please check the church website at www.dupageuchurch.org for updates. If you search under DuPage UU Church on Facebook, you will find a number of ways to be in community with us as well. Today and each Sunday, join us for our Zoom social time following the service from 11:30 to 12. Socialize with friends and ponder a question from Rev Connie as we break into small groups. We hope to see you there. The Zoom link can be found in the Members tab of our website, the order of service, and in the weekly email.
We are called to worship, to feel our connections with each other, to know that we are part of something larger than ourselves, to experience awe and wonder at the mysteries that surround us, to give thanks for the many ways in which we are blessed, to lift up those things that are worthy of our consideration, to shape worth and make meaning in our lives. We are called to worship together.
I'd like to claim as a reminder of our mission of being a light of the world.
Please join us in singing hymn number 40, The Morning Hangs a Signal.
Thank
Please join us in our spoken affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
It is time to gather. Once upon a time, God said, I'm bored because I don't have anything to do. I want to play with my friends. And because God is God, as soon as the words were spoken, God's friends were there. And when God saw them all gathered, God said, I've been bored because I haven't had anything to do. Let's play something. Good idea, said God's friends. What shall we play? Well, God thought for a minute and then said, I know, let's play hide and seek. And the friends all said, yay, because they knew that hide and seek with God was always exciting and different because God was the one who hid, and God always thought of wonderful places to hide. So God's friends closed their eyes tight and counted to 10. And when they opened their eyes, God wasn't there anymore. So they all went off to look for God. And one friend decided to look close on earth and soon came to a meadow. And as he was searching, he stopped to admire the tender new sprouts of green grass pushing their way up toward the sun. And as he bent over to look more closely at the tender green, he realized there was something special and amazing and wonderful about it. So he jumped up and ran back to home base calling, I found God! God is green and growing. I found God in the grass. Another of God's friends decided to look for God in the night. She watched the sun go down and heard the workday noises stop. And she saw the lights in the houses go out. And as it got darker and the peaceful night wrapped itself around her, she listened very hard. And then she realized there was something special and amazing and wonderful about it. And when it was so still that she could see and hear nothing at all, she suddenly jumped up and ran to home base, calling out, I found God! God is dark and peaceful. I found God in the night. Well, a third friend looked on the earth and felt the mystery of the grass growing toward the sun. And he stayed and watched the night come on, and he felt the mystery of the darkness and the stars, and he thought to himself, these mysteries are special and amazing and wonderful. But when he finally came back to home base, he said, I found wonderful mysteries, but I'm not sure if I want to call them God. Well, a fourth friend decided to go look for God where people were. He joined a group of people going home from work and went with them into the store where they bought food. And he went with them back out onto the street as they started for their homes. And he was with them when someone came up and said, please, I'm very hungry. Could you share a little food with me? And the people readily agreed. And as he watched them share, he realized that there was something special and amazing and wonderful about these people. He turned around and ran to home base, calling out, I found God! God is love and sharing. I found God in people who care for others. Finally, two more of God's friends, a boy and a girl, decided to look for God together. And after a time, they came to a house and decided to look for God in the house. And in the house, they saw a room, and they looked for God in the room, and in the room they saw a mirror, and they looked for God in the mirror. And as they looked in the mirror, they realized there was something special and amazing and wonderful being reflected in it. And they turned around and ran to home base calling out, we found God! We found God in us! And at this, God appeared again and said, I had so much fun. Weren't those good hiding places? Some of you found me, others weren't sure, and others are still looking. And that's okay, because the most important thing is to just play the game. Let's do it again. I'm sure I can think of some other good hiding places. And they all called out, "Ollie, Ollie, oxen free," and the game started all over again.
Please join us in our song affirmation.
Sing loudly till the stars have heard. Enjoy, feast on this bounteous word. Our praises call us to explore, till sun shall rise and set no more.
We hold each other in our hearts and minds with all our joys and all our sorrows. We remember those who are experiencing losses of various kinds and those facing health challenges. We are aware that many are faced with heightened difficulties presented by these times that continue to be challenging for all. Even when the cares of the world weigh on us, may we find joy in our connections with each other and in the pleasures that life holds. Let us care for one another and for ourselves in all the ways we can. As we hold each other in our hearts and minds with all our joys and all our sorrows, whether spoken or unspoken, let's take a moment to be quiet together. This poem is titled Praying into the Silence by Frederick Zidek, a Unitarian Universalist poet based in Omaha. You must gather yourself into the basket of your skin. Listen to the wind moving its divine puzzle in and around you. Become aware that you are an observer to these events, a sojourner daring to enter the quiet slopes that lead to silence. You must walk away from the sounds of your own voice echoing its way from neuron to neuron, from cell to DNA. Let your thoughts go limp. Help your inner noise change to luminescence. Your focus to the moment when silence and light become one. Seek the place where you are hollow as a straw, thirsty as a desert, open as a window waiting for the wind. Our meditative hymn is number 123, Spirit of Life.
Youth Outlook is our special collection for September. Youth Outlook is the first social service agency in Illinois solely dedicated to the support of LGBTQI+ youth. They work in 6 counties in the Chicago suburbs, offering drop-in centers for youth, parent support, and community education. Accepting people for who they are, as they are, in the way that they express themselves is everything. And with support, Youth Outlook can take a community of youth that are at highest risk for suicidality and victimization and bring that down exponentially. Youth Outlook participated in our July 18th summer service, which you may still watch on YouTube, and learn even more about Youth Outlook and how they help our community. The offering will now be given and received with grateful appreciation of our shared hopes and values. This poem is titled Creation in Three-Quarter Time with Mixed Metaphors by Annie Forster. There was space, but no beginning. And in the space were spaces, and between the spaces, stars. A kind of celestial progressive dinner without food. A kind of heavenly musical chairs without a loser. And their movements made music, swish and bang and hum. And their music made dancing, sway and step and bow. And their dancing made intimacy, come and stay and join. And their intimacy made possibility and potential. And maybe, and yes. A kind of blind date between old friends, a kind of dream without sleeping. Possibility was egg, potential was seed, and the possible egg hatched and spawned and bore. And the potential seed sowed and sprouted and bloomed. And egg and seed combined and made creation. A kind of Mardi Gras in July without Lent. A kind of memorial service for silence and emptiness without regret. There was creation in space. There was creativity in the spaces. The stars blazed with creatures and creators, and everywhere there was and is music. Listen within you. And everywhere there was and is dancing. Look around you. And possibility and potential are ever again intimate. Look between us. And the eggs are within every living being of every gender. Everything is possibility. And the seeds are within every living being of every gender. Everything is potential. And the music is dance, and the dancing is intimacy, and the intimacy is song. A kind of cosmic choir in tap shoes, without program or score.
Theology is poetry. Theology is and is not poetry. Poetry is a metaphor for theology. I am neither a poet nor a theologian, just a minister. And as a minister, I use both poetry and theology to help me, to help others, to help me help others make sense of the world. Theology is metaphor. In his autobiography, the British philosopher Bertrand Russell wrote about his imprisonment during World War I for anti-war activity. Wrote Russell, "I was much cheered on my arrival by the warder at the gates, who had to take particulars about me. He asked my religion, and I replied, agnostic. He asked me how to spell it, and remarked with a sigh, well, there are many religions, but I suppose they all worship the same God." Russell reported that the warder's remark kept him cheerful for at least a week. Of course, agnostics and atheists do not worship any God. The God that some agnostics and atheists don't worship may be the same God that some other people do, but not necessarily. I'm pretty sure that whatever ultimate reality may be, there is only one ultimate reality, true for all, whether we believe it or not, whether we believe in it or not, whether we have words for it or not, whether we think we have words for it or not. Yet all religions are not the same, and all religions really do not worship the same God, metaphorically speaking. In the conclusion of his famed book, The World's Religions, originally titled The Religions of Man, Huston Smith wrote, To the question of how the world's religions relate to each other, 3 answers suggest themselves. The first holds that one of the world's religions is superior to the others. Now that the peoples of the world are getting to know one another better, we hear this answer less often than we used to. But even so, it should not be dismissed out of hand. Smith notes that his book avoids evaluative comparison in principle, but that nothing in the comparative study of religion requires that they cross the finishing line of the reader's regard in a dead heat. A second position, continues Huston Smith, lies at the opposite end of the spectrum. It holds that the religions are all basically alike. Differences are acknowledged, but according to this second view, they are incidental in comparison to the great enduring truths on which the religions unite. This appeals to our longing for human togetherness, continues Huston Smith, but on inspection it proves to be a tricky position. For as soon as it moves beyond vague generalities, every religion has some version of the golden rule, or surely we all believe in some sort of something, it founders on the fact that the religions differ in what they consider essential and what negotiable. Hinduism and Buddhism split over this issue, as did Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And Huston Smith's third conception of the way the religions are related likens them to a stained glass window, whose sections divide the light of the sun into different colors. This analogy, he says, allows for significant differences between the religions without pronouncing on their relative worth. If the peoples of the world differ from one another temperamentally, these differences could well affect the way spirit appears to them. It could be seen from different angles, so to speak. Stated in the language of revelation, for God to be heard and understood, divine revelations would have had to be couched in the idioms of its respective hearers. And I would posit that the idioms of its respective hearers, to use Huston Smith's terminology, the language in which so-called divine revelation is heard, is the language of metaphor, the language through which we attempt to express our understanding of ultimate reality. One light, many windows, as Unitarian Universalist minister Forrest Church expressed the stained glass metaphor. The one light is ultimate reality. The many windows are the metaphorical lenses we use to interpret and make sense of that ultimate reality. Our religious metaphors determine and reflect how we position ourselves in relation to that ultimate reality. Some years ago, I began using the term metaphorical theist to describe my theological position. Increasingly, I add that I am a metaphorical theist with humanist tendencies. For me, metaphorical theism means that there is that one ultimate reality, and we use our different metaphors to interpret it. I call myself a theist, which for me means that we human beings are part of something greater than ourselves. And I'm mostly comfortable, using the word God to describe the creating, sustaining, and transforming power in and of the universe. And I sometimes find that describing myself as a theist, even a metaphorical one, or using the word God, is a distraction. Fundamentally, I am a humanist, but I'm not a fundamentalist humanist. I understand humanism to mean that whether or not there is a divine power in the universe, human beings are the hands and feet, the ones who act in the world to make this world a heaven or a hell for themselves and each other. I could also describe myself as a process thinker. The simplest way I know to explain process thought is that everything affects everything. I understand chaos theory and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, to be different ways of framing the same basic concept. Another way of saying this would be that I believe that everything affects everything is part of the literal workings of ultimate reality, and that the interdependent web of existence is one metaphor for that truth. Metaphor describes something unfamiliar or unknown in terms of something more familiar or better known. It uses something concrete as a way to understand the abstract. Sally McFaig's book, Metaphorical Theology, was one of the very first books I read in theological school, and that must be, 30 years ago, almost. And it was clearly influential in the formulation of my metaphorical theism. Her thesis is that both reason and faith are metaphorical in origin and in process, and all language and most thought are interpretive, resulting from understanding of this in terms of that. Metaphor is a method for approximating truth and is an essential way to conceptualize something we cannot directly observe, she says. In her book, Speaking in Parables, McFaig notes that metaphor is the poet's way to try and define something for which there is no dictionary meaning. It is the poet's attempt to be precise and clear about something for which ordinary language has no way of talking. Metaphor has its limits. The concept being described both is and is not like the concept used to describe it. To borrow some metaphors of personification from the hymn, Bring Many Names, the God of our Christian heritage both is and is not a strong mother, working night and day, planning all the wonders of creation, setting each equation genius at play. Both is and is not a warm father, hugging every child, feeling all the strains of human living, caring and forgiving till we're reconciled. Both is and is not old and graying. Both is and is not young and growing. In an essay on Huffington Post titled The Rabbi Who Believes in Zeus, with the subtitle, Why All Intuitions of God Are Incomplete, Rabbi Alan Lurie responds to a challenge from a reader who wrote, humans have worshiped thousands of gods through the ages. Remember, they were convinced that they had it right too. Just as you don't believe in Zeus, I don't believe in your God. I'll quote the rabbi's response at length because I like it so much. The rabbi responds, there are two assumptions in this statement that I'd like to challenge. First, not all religious people are convinced that they have it right. For example, Unitarian Universalists tend not to be convinced they have it right. That is an assumption that simply is not based on facts. Unquestioned certainty is a fundamentalist position, but it is not an inherent or even desirable quality in a spiritual life. And it is not the position taken by a vast number of believers or by most theologians. There's a long history of debate in all religions about the nature of the divine, the meaning of scriptures, and the purpose of doctrines. In Judaism, the rabbi elaborates, the Talmud records vigorous debates between the most educated and dedicated rabbis in order to remind us that disagreements in search of truth are holy acts, that simple answers are to be questioned, and that we must resist the lure of certainty. Second, Rabbi Lurie continues, I do believe in Zeus. No, he says, I don't think that there is a huge bearded guy dressed in a toga sitting in a palace on a mountain in the sky, looking to hurl his thunderbolt or abduct a beautiful human woman. Such a literal view may have been taken by some ancient Greeks, just as some today read their religion's stories literally. But this was not how the great philosophers and educated people of that time saw Zeus. and it is not the intent behind those who first described the many Greek deities. The rabbi says, I believe in Zeus in the same way that Parmenides, Pythagoras, Plato, Heraclitus, and later Plotinus did, as a poetic vision of a true aspect of the divine. And Rabbi Lurie continues, above the construct that humans make to describe the spiritual realm is a higher, truer realm that is beyond our ability to adequately describe or fully comprehend. Zeus, Plato knew, is a symbolic manifestation of the essence of creative power, and those who followed Zeus sought to deepen these qualities just as followers of Athena sought to partake of the essences of wisdom and judgment. These essences, Plato taught, emanate from the same source and are implanted in physicality. People who intuit these essences give them form, which may be human in characteristics, but these forms are not the essences. The pantheon of gods were human attempts to describe the spiritual experience in an anthropomorphic story. I'm almost done with Rabbi Lurie, but I still like him a lot. Zeus, like all the representations of the divine that humans have intuited, including the god of monotheism, is partial, incomplete, and flawed, perceived in clouded and flickering glimpses. I love and honor this search in its halting steps, imaginings of powerful deities, yearning heroes, and colorful stories, because it represents our highest yearnings. And here ends my extended quotation from Rabbi Lurie. The Greek gods are powerful metaphors. All our theological metaphors are powerful. The knowledge that our theological constructs are metaphors helps us to avoid idolatry. Idolatry is worshiping the part as if it were the whole, and metaphor is only part of the truth. A book about metaphor titled I is an Other, The Secret Life of Metaphor and How It Shapes the Way We See the World, quotes the poet Robert Frost. In a lecture titled Education by Poetry, Frost said, I have wanted in late years to go further and further in making metaphor the whole of thinking. Frost warned, people don't know when they are being fooled by a metaphor. And Frost declared, unless you are at home in the metaphor, unless you have had your proper poetical education in the metaphor, you are not safe anywhere, because you are not at ease with figurative values. You don't know the metaphor in its strength and in its weakness. You don't know how far you may expect to ride it and when it may break down. Sally McFaig suggests that serious attention to metaphorical language as the way to fund theology ought to change the way theological reflection is carried on. It ought, for instance, to make theological discussions of the person of Jesus and the resurrection less anxious about logical precision, clarity, and definiteness. And to translate, awareness of theology as metaphor keeps us from being too literal in our interpretations. Awareness of theology as metaphor keeps us from being too literal in our belief or in our disbelief. Metaphors, powerful as they are most effective when held lightly, not literally. And so I conclude, metaphors be with you. And our closing hymn is number 301, Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky.
Touch the earth, reach the sky, walk on shores while spirit
As we extinguish the chalice flame, these words by our Unitarian forebear, Theodore Parker. Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Its profession of faith, divine living. And may we live our lives fully and creatively so that we may be a blessing to ourselves, to each other, and to all those whose lives we touch.